Welcome back, folks, to the Random Video Blog, where I, Graham GSM Matthews, run down all my random thoughts on the wrestling world, share a few stories, etc., etc. Today in the Random Video Blog, I want to give a review of Chris Jericho's third book, The Best in the World at What I Have No Idea. An absolutely amazing book. You could just end the review right now, because that's pretty much all I have to say about it. Just kidding. But so basically, it was funny, too, because I just finished this book yesterday, which sounds terrible for someone that pre-ordered it and got it on the day that it was released. In October of 2014, so almost 2 years ago, I got this book in the mail. I was so excited. And we'll backtrack a little bit here, too. I read the first two books. I got the first one, I think, for Christmas in 2010. I read it immediately afterwards. I read the second book in 2012. And I loved both of them, obviously. I think Chris Jericho is undoubtedly one of my favorite authors, period. Not just wrestling autobiographies or anything, which I've been reading a lot of. And I probably talked about this when I reviewed the Hogan book, which, by the way, you can check out here in the Random Video Blog, right here in the playlist from about a year ago. I do read a lot of wrestling autobiographies, and I used to read them a lot more often than I currently do. Not because I lost interest or whatever. I just don't have the time anymore, unfortunately, with everything else that I do. I just don't have the time to read as regularly as I once did. So anyway, the first wrestling autobiography that I ever read, and hopefully I could do more, reading or more book reviews here on the Random Video Blog in the future with other past books that I've read, was Ted DiBiase, The $1 Million Man's, and he did a great job with his book. I read his in early of 2009. And since then, I think I read half of Rey Mysterio's. I don't know why I didn't finish it, but I read The Rise and Fall, or The Death of WCW, a book that was lent to me by John, an amazing book. The Rise and Fall of ECW. I read Batista's book, Goldust's book, Mick Foley's The Lockdown book. I didn't read the other ones. I just read the latest one. I'll probably go back and read the other ones at some point. But I've read a lot of wrestling autobiographies, over the years. And Chris Jericho's are undoubtedly my favorite, just because of his writing style. And I feel like, as a writer myself, not just because he's an author, but just his writing style alone feels like I can relate to him, because I feel like my writing style, like the parentheses and kind of adding your own input and you're adding your own voice to each book, is invaluable. And I feel like I do that same thing in my writing as well. So I always enjoyed his books. For those that did not read the first two or even this one, the first one, A Lion's Heart, or A Lion's Tale rather, covered his time from WCW, or just kind of growing up in wrestling, from the late 80s, early 80s, whatever, and then the early 90s, so when he got into WCW. And then beyond that point, covering up until he went to the WWE, that's when the first book ended. The second book started, I think, right when he arrived in WWE, and ended after he left, and then came back in 2007. So the book closed off when he came back in 2007. And after I finished reading that book on a summer vacation that I went on 4 years ago, I just remember being so excited to read the next one, just because that was the time I grew up as a fan. That was the time I kind of got into wrestling, was around the time that Chris Jericho came back. Fun fact for you, I actually did not start watching wrestling, obviously, until April of 2008. That's not a fun fact, I say that all the time. But I did watch Chris Jericho's return. I did know of it for whatever reason. I think I saw like the vignettes or the commercials for it on USA Network, which I was a huge fan of at that time and still am to this day. I saw the commercial for Jericho's return to the company, and I was talking wrestling with a few friends that I had. One really good friend that I had and a friend of his that brought up wrestling, and he was asking my friend if he had seen Jericho's return. And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, blah, blah, blah. And he asked me a question. He's like, you liar, you don't watch wrestling? And I was like, oh, sorry, don't jump on me. But, so that was funny. But yeah, reliving that in this book was great. This book runs from his 2007 return up until when he comes back in the Royal Rumble of 2013. It's almost 5 to 6 years of content in this book. And like I said, undoubtedly, not just for its writing style, the jokes, and everything that Jericho kind of puts into these amazing novels, just the content itself fascinates me even more than the other stuff, just because I grew up as a time during, when all this shit was happening. From 2008 to when he came back in 2013, Jericho has always been one of my favorites, and so it's a really thrilling read. So basically, as you could probably tell, in that time he covers the amazing Shawn Michaels feud. I would say that the Punk feud, which I know he talks about a lot, and how great it was, what went into it, blah, blah, blah. He does not spend much time talking about it in the book. It's at the very end of the book. I literally just read about it yesterday. I read maybe 30 to 40 pages in this book to finish it off yesterday at work. It was deader than dead on National Book Lovers Day, on the anniversary, the 17-year anniversary, my favorite number, of Jericho's WWE debut. The timing of when I finished this book could not have been better. And I'm taping this on Wednesday, by the way. I know this is going up on Friday. But, so that being said, he does not talk a lot about the CM Punk feud, but what he does talk about it, what he does kind of shed some light on, and I've read this story before in like other various interviews and whatever, how he wanted to get his initials tattooed, or I think just something of his tattooed on Punk's arm to kind of further that feud, and Vince said no because he thought it would be bloody. I thought that was really fascinating. Have you never heard that story before? Why he wanted to come back to the company, how he came back to the company doing that, yeah, come on, baby, let's go. Like, what went into that, and not talking for a few weeks. And again, I think the biggest part of this book that I love the most, every chapter has something, insightful and new information, but I think my favorite part of the book is when he's talking about the Shawn Michaels feud. And you don't have to wait long to start reading about it. I think it's in the first few chapters, or at least in the first quarter of the book. So, yeah, just even to backtrack to even more, like I said, I bought this book in October of 2014, and at that point, I was only a few weeks removed from buying Hulk Hogan's book, which I reviewed here on the channel, like I said, about a year ago, and it took me forever to read that book, and I said I would not start Jericho's book until I finished Hogan's. So, I finished Hogan's, finally, right before I went back to school last summer, and I reviewed that here on the channel for you guys, as you guys know, and then I started reading Jericho's book. I don't think until, like, November, December. I remember reading it in the car on my way back to school, and it was the quickest 2 hours that I'd ever experienced, just because it takes 2.5 hours to get back to my college from where I currently live, and it was the quickest 2.5 hours ever, because I was loving everything that was in this fucking book, and not many books can make me smile/laugh out loud, and this book did just that. Like, I'm reading this book in the car, while my parents are driving me back to school, my stepdad's driving me back to school, and I'm literally laughing out loud at the stuff that Jericho's talking about. Like the guest host stuff, he talks about his favorite guest host, his least favorite guest host, stuff like that. The Jericho stuff, which was awesome. So he talks a lot about that stuff and his various runs. The feud of the Rey Mysterio, what went into that. Like I said, what else does he talk about? Kind of the Nexus thing too. He kind of shed some light about that. And again, a lot of the stories that you will read in this book, if you're as big of a Jerichoholic as I am, you've probably heard not half, but at least some of the stories through his podcast, interviews, and whatever. This book came out 2 years ago, so you've probably heard many of the stories by this point anyway. But again, it's just something about his writing style that really just kind of resonates with me personally. I think it's a perfect word to use. It just resonates with me, and I feel like I can relate to him, relate to his writing, and just the stories he's telling alone. Not only the way that he's writing them, but the stories themselves are just fucking great. And he's talking about the Mickey Rourke feud. Like, I was reading about the Mickey Rourke feud from 2009 when they did that whole angle going into WrestleMania 25, and he talks about why that match was next and what happened instead, blah, 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 and why Mickey Rourke thought it was real and all this other shit when Jericho was talking shit about him. That was fascinating. I remember reading that at my Christmas Eve party. I brought this book to a family Christmas Eve party, which was good, but I felt like, I don't know, I don't really, not that I bring books to parties and shit, but just that one in particular, there's not really much to do with that annual Christmas party that I go to every year for my family. So I brought this book, and I'm just sitting on the couch in the TV room reading about that specific story, and it was just so amazing. It just put me in a 10 times better mood, just because it was a great story. And again, even the stories that aren't wrestling related, if you're obviously watching this channel, then you're probably a wrestling fan. 99% sure that you're a wrestling fan, hopefully anyway, because this channel is all wrestling. But even beyond that, I would say that even the non-wrestling stories, because Jericho has a lot of rock stories in the book, are also very entertaining. He's talking a lot about Fozzy, the time that he had off, from... and also Dancing with the Stars plays a big role in this book that I forgot to mention too, that he did when he was taking time off from 2010 to 2012, that he did Dancing with the Stars, how that came about, blah, blah, blah. His various love-hate relationship with Vince McMahon, which I think is the biggest themes throughout this book, which I think is phenomenal as well. But again, going back to my original point, even the rock stories that he's talking about, people that I was never really familiar with. I kind of know some of the names just because he's talked to a lot of them on his podcast in the past 2 to 3 years. So again, a lot of the people, or a lot of the stories that he talks about in this book that don't have anything to do with wrestling, that kind of take place on his off season, so to speak, during his hiatuses and whatever, his various hiatuses, or is that how you say the plural version of hiatus? I'm not sure, but even those are just really, really entertaining. So obviously, as you could tell from this near 10-minute review, this book is well worth checking out. Go get it today. I'm sure it's in paperback at some point. At this point, it came out 2 years ago. I just love having the hard copy version for whatever reason, and hopefully I will get to meet Jericho at some point. I know at Jamie Lee Mack got to do it a couple years ago. Actually, just a year ago this past week, and he tweeted about it. And that was great, so I saw the picture, and that's a phenomenal picture. But I wish I could do the same and hopefully get this book signed by him, because Jericho is one of my inspirations wrestling-wise. author-wise, writing-wise, basically everything that he does is just so, inspiring, just because he wears a lot of hats and he's great at pretty much all of what he does. So he's the best in the world at what he does, or at what he has no idea, so to kind of go full circle. So that being said, guys, check out the book. Even if you're not a huge reader, you will fucking love this book. If you like Jericho, you like reading, you'll love the book. Even if you don't like Jericho and you don't like reading, there's some parts of the book you will still find very enjoyable. So that being said, again, like I said with the Hogan book review, which I did almost a year ago at this point, almost exactly a year ago, I really want to do more of these book reviews because I try to read a lot. Like I said, I just had enough time at work yesterday because it was so fucking dead to finish it. And then I've read it like on car rides and stuff more recently as opposed to listening to my iPod. So I'm trying to read a lot more because these books are just so great. And spoiler alert, the next book review that I hope to do is this one right here. I got this in the mail about a year ago because I wanted Daniel Bryan to sign it at an autograph signing here in Connecticut. I couldn't go because of I had my wisdom teeth taken out literally that same day. And I was out the door. And my parents convinced me to stay because I was in so much pain. It probably would not have worked out too pretty. So thankfully it did not happen, or unfortunately that did not happen. But I will hopefully be reading this book in the very near future. And hopefully it is not another year before I have another book review here on the channel on the Random Video Blog. So if you guys like these book reviews, let me know. Maybe I can reread one of my old wrestling autobiographies. I also read George Steele's book, George the Animal Steele book. I have Bob Backlund's autobiography. I think I have another one back there as well. I just have so many that I really want to get through and read at some point. It's just a matter of finding the time in between writing, working, and watching wrestling and everything else that's going on right now. So that being said, as always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. All your support is amazingly appreciated. Next week, we are only 2 days out from SummerSlam on the Random Video Blog here on Friday. So I believe, spoiler alert, I will be talking about not only SummerSlam, because I think I'll probably do what I did last year and do a SummerSlam experience video in the subsequent edition of the video blog that Friday following SummerSlam. Because I will be there all 3 days. From what it looks like right now, I will be at TakeOver, I will be at SummerSlam, and I will be at Raw. So it's going to be a fucking amazing blockbuster weekend. But that being said, though, so next Friday before that, and 2 weeks before the SummerSlam Experience video, next week we should be talking about my top 5 either TakeOver specials or TakeOver matches. I forgot what it was. It's on the lineup. I forgot what it was. But just know that it will be TakeOver oriented unless something monumental happens in the next 7 days. That's what we will be talking about here in the Random Video Blog. I know it's subject to change. It's always subject to change. I know I always say, like, oh, next week we're talking about this, and we don't. It's because things change, off the cuff all the time. But that being said, that's what we should be talking about next Friday here in the Random Video Blog. So that being said, guys, and obviously I am all SummerSlam out. This will be the shirt, by the way, that I will be wearing at SummerSlam, and I appreciate everyone who's been saying, and I've been getting a lot more messages recently than ever before, like good work on the channel and all that other stuff. Thank you, as always, for your amazing support. I know it's kind of random, but I appreciate all your support of here on the channel. We are quickly nearing the 1,000 milestone, so I look forward to when that day comes, hopefully before the end of the year. I don't know how likely that is, but it would be great to hit 1,000, that 1K, before the end of 2016. But yeah, SummerSlam is quickly approaching, folks. As you can tell by my t-shirt right here, be sure to find me on the Twitter machine. And that was an awful segue, and it wasn't really a segue to begin with, but on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant, on Facebook at facebook.com/graham.gsm.matthews, and right here on YouTube by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing, as I said before. So again, guys, I don't want to hold you any longer. Have an amazing weekend. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch you guys down the road.